sound issues. And
Okay, and I think we are live.
meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. It actually notifies me that it's streaming live on Facebook. That's cool.
That's what it says, and it's got a preview, and it starts the time ticking right when it goes live. So usually it's a couple of seconds after I hit that button. So with that said, welcome back to anybody who's out there watching tonight. I'm Kyle Paskowitz. I'm the chairman of Parentalink and the founder of Family Court Reform USA. And this is the third in a series that I call Parentalink Live, that we are bringing on different people from across the cause, the parental rights cause, and parents that have been impacted, attorneys, experts in parental alienation. We have a number of guests already lined up on our calendar, and we're still a few spots open. So some of those names are still to be determined, but we've had a couple of pretty good episodes so far with some different parents that have come out and talked about some of the issues that they've had with family court, and a lot of the, part of what we do is try to raise awareness about these issues, and people having the ability to tell their stories and allow people to hear, number one, that if they've been through this, that they're not alone. And number two, if they've never been through this, to see how widespread of a problem it is. So our guest tonight is Mr. Todd McKellips. He is a father from here in the state of Washington. Todd is also a chaplain. He is former law enforcement. And I know you are also known as the tiny house guy. That's kind of your claim to fame. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Todd, and kind of what, maybe how we met and how you got involved with this cause?
Yeah. So, born in Tacoma, raised in Tacoma area, grew up with a dad that was actively, he worked with Pierce Transit, but he was also very involved in law enforcement. My grandpa was one of the first state patrolmen that patrolled Pacific Avenue all the way up to the Mount Rainier. Grew up always having Pierce County Sheriff officers around and just hanging out and especially involved in the transit scene. Born and raised, homeschooled my entire life, Christian. I kind of grew up Mennonite for the first half of my years until I was about 12, 13. My parents kind of left that faith, and it was just standard Christian after that. and my parents were involved in politics. My mom was more of a pacifist. My dad more of a nuke Iraq if they move an inch. And my mom didn't like guns being in the house, and my dad loved guns. And so, I had a weird family dynamic like that. But my parents did get divorced when I was 18. I remember being 8, 9, 10 years old, constantly telling my brothers, because we didn't really have any other friends that came over really, but that our parents aren't meant to be together. They should get a divorce. So when it actually happened, it was a sigh of relief and kind of something that was like, oh, that needed to happen. It did affect my younger siblings immensely just because of the family dynamic. Like I was already working, already out of the house, but the younger brothers, it became my dad, we would do things to win my brother's affections. And so they would get mad at my mom and move out and go move in his house. So it became a pull on my mom, who is honestly going above and beyond in some areas and trying to support mortgage payment and everything else that, my dad gave her the house, but it included the mortgage payment. But moving on, in years, I resented my dad a bit, but we got through that, and really close to my mom even until today. But through the family dynamic, ended up dating a girl that wasn't so good for me. It was kind of someone that I didn't want to bring home to my parents and introduce them to, and this girl, she she liked me at the time and kind of told everybody around her, I'm going to do whatever it takes to marry this guy. And so we hung out and we dated for a couple of years, and then I just could not make things work with her. We had different spiritual, different faith-based thought processes, and so we split it off. But over the course of a year, there became some issues. I got injured with Pierce County Sheriff in 2005, and through that ended up taking some opiates and drugs that the doctor had recommended, even told me that weren't addictive at the time, and just kind of fell into a place where even my church friends thought I was a lot of fun on the blue pills and different things like that, but I didn't realize it was affecting me, my decision making, and different things that were going on in my life. But not to make excuses, we ended up hooking up on a one night fling kind of thing, way into our beyond our relationship. And she told me that she was pregnant a few months later. And so I stepped right up and said, all right, let's get married, and did that whole bit. And she was like, no, I'm not getting married for a baby. And so we tried working things out. It again, it did not, it was not there. We just butted heads way too much. And something in my life has always been faith and God, and just could not make that work. But moving on down the road a piece, we had the kid, and just I was very involved. She asked me to pick out some names, and she wanted a Southern name, and ended up coming up with the name Hunter, and my best friend's name was James at the time, and so he got that name. Look, she liked that name and went with it. After I gave her a few, she didn't like those, and so we moved on. But there was I had a good relationship with her dad. I had a good relationship with her, but there would be points in time where either I was dating somebody, or just she didn't like what was going on and wanted to control me, and stuff wasn't going down her direction, where she would stop letting me see him. And I don't know if you want the story of what went on with all that, with my relationships and the child, my son, and the involvement there. But we ran into these little problems that ended up becoming big problems for me, because she had all the rights, and when it comes to the state and how they look at things, they immediately just sided with her. And it was to the point where within an hour of me graduating my parental education class and coming home, she was going off the rocker kind of thing and going down a direction that I'm like, wait a minute, we just took a class that said you would not do this kind of stuff. But there was no accountability. I went to my lawyer multiple times, and I actually got responses of, well, can you just get back together with her and make things work? And so and even some good friends, started saying that, just listening to me vent on them. And it became a very alone world. And that is, I think why what you're doing is great, Kyle. That there are other people going through this out there, and not just male sex either. It's just what the court system deems fair. When you're not married, when you're married, normally what I'm hearing is most people get 50-50. But when you're a boyfriend scenario, you sign that paternity affidavit because you're hoping to, I'm the father, I'm not even going to ask for a test, but I want to be involved in this kid's life. And then you have just brain games starting immediately, and just if you look at her the wrong way, all of a sudden you're not able to see your son and all that. So I actually ended up moving to Idaho for a little while because of work, because I was laid off and injured, and I actually found work in law enforcement in Idaho. And so I moved over there with the intentions of moving back, and we were getting our parenting plan set in stone. And I had, in there that if I was more than 75 miles away, I'd see him for once a month on a weekend. And if I was more local, I wanted to have him over more. And my attorney was really specific about, making sure that Hunter knew that, he had a bedroom at my house, that this was his house as much as, his room at his mom's house. And, but it's interesting, even now I'm down the road, 12, 13 years later here, he's 13 now. And, just in the last week, he kind of went on a emotional roller coaster with me and started really mouthing off and disrespecting me, which he's doesn't really do. He's actually a pretty good kid. But we had it out this last Wednesday, and it got me to the point where I've never spanked him in my entire life, because she doesn't do that. But she smacks him across the face and different things. He's admitted to me that, that he swears and she'll just like smack him, and it's no big deal. But I turned around and I smacked his butt, and not very hard, but it was right here in my office. Actually, he was disrespecting me and started swearing at me and yelling at me. So I picked him up, and he started squirming, and I just smacked him on the butt. And not a violent person, but I actually cried later, because I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that dad, but you cannot disrespect me. And he's been on a little tangent lately of being very unkind to his siblings. My wife and I, of going on 8 years now. We basically, we have a 3 and a 5-year-old together, and he just comes over and thinks that everything is his, and he doesn't want to share it with his siblings. So he's been gradually growing more selfish, and I'm like, I'm not gonna have you go down this road of path. I want you to be a good kid, and stop being a jerk to your brother. So he was fighting me on it and not listening, and just thought, well, I just took a piece of candy, and because we had them all go grab a piece of candy at the same time, and he went snatched something in front of his brother, and kind of messed up the whole way things go. He always wants to be first, the firstborn syndrome kind of thing, and child dynamics. It's been fun, but I had to pull dad rank and let him know I was wrong. And then when he started disrespecting me, I firmly believe I had to discipline him at that point and make sure he knew that he wasn't the boss. And again, looking back, I'm like, I was harsh with him. I was, could have taken a softer tone, but I'm human. I don't really believe I completely made a mistake, but I punished him, and I smacked him on the butt, and his mom found out about that right off the bat. And the next thing I know, she's telling me I am not seeing my son until I go and see a counselor for my anger issues. So, that's just happened last week, but it's been nonstop, that kind of stuff for, 12, 13 years. And she'll get sick and tired of him. Eventually she'll call me up and say, your child's showing attitude, come get him. So that kind of scenario.
But then when you address it, it's all of a sudden a problem.
Yeah. And to go on that, I'm a PCO in my district, 31st district here in the Puyallup area. And I show up and volunteering with the local Republicans, and I don't like actually picking a side. I'm more, it's funny, we all say we're more independent, more libertarian or something like that. But we've ended up picking a party because they're the ones who get the votes and that kind of stuff. But I'm very moderate on a lot of issues, but very conservative when it comes to Second Amendment rights and parental rights and rights businesses have to practice what they deem necessary. And conservatives are more business based, and being a business owner like myself, and just showing up and saying, what can I do to help? I became a tiny home guy because housing affordability is just nuts. People my age, people younger, can't buy a home ever in our lifetimes. So I've made it my life's goal to help other people get housing and attain a home ownership, whatever it takes to make that happen. And I believe in helping people. And that one of that avenues is being involved in politics heavily, has been involved myself in the Republican Party and be out there serving people. And that's how I met you, Kyle, was, just with the local 25th group. I think we met there the the Denny's and hit it off and started talking about different things there. And I see myself eventually running, into some kind of position later, running into politics, and it's almost a necessary evil to say that, we gotta change the world, we gotta change the dynamics. I'm not okay with the status quo. I'm not okay with, parents, not being looked at individually. They try to make these laws that cover and blanket everybody, and then you got judges who interpret the law with bias. And they I haven't even been to court really about this, but in the last 6-9 months, my ex has said, well, we're moving to Spokane, and they moved 3 times without okaying it with the court already, and putting me, he used to ride this school bus to where I live now, and she just up and moved to Fife area, and those kind of situations, where I have to actually become the expert in the parenting plan, like, and memorize it, because one day I'm reading it and I realize, oh, she's not supposed to just be able to move whenever she wants. So I complain, and then he says, it's too late, it's just, you might as well let it go. And then she calls me up and says, well, we're going to be moving and to Spokane, which is 6-7 hour drive. Can't drive it over the pass in the winter. And then she calls me and says, I want this to be amicable. So, I don't want it to cost you money. And she knows that's, something I don't have a lot of. And she'll use it against me, saying, hey, I'm going to win no matter what, but, let's do this amicably. So I'm going to give you just like more extended vacations, but you're never going to see him the rest of the year. You're going to see him the 3 times a year kind of thing. And that's it. And for, a week and a week and a half. And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. I think what's fair is 50-50. I'm not an abusive dad. I'm not a bad dad that cares less about my child. I've wanted to be with him more since he was born, and be, his room is his room, and I end up being, that glorified Uber driver that when I pick him up, his first words out of his mouth are either "I want tacos" or "Can you take me to my buddy's house and be, basically be gone all day playing games?" And I'm like, no, dude, I want to see you. We're going to hang out. We're going to go on a dad date, I call it. And so we'll go eat tacos, or we'll go whatever, go play with his brothers. But, it's funny because when he's over, he wants to be gone with his pals, which is going to hit him heavily when he moves out of the area, because he's not going to have those pals. And we have conversations. His mom, is more of the Santa Claus is real, and, keep telling him that. And I'm like, no, that life is real, bro. And, I'll have serious conversations with him, which gets me into trouble too, because, in our parenting plan, it says, don't talk about the parenting plan. Don't talk about child support, all those kind of things. And, he'll overhear a conversation with my wife and I, where we're like, okay, or, child support is, blah, 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 we got to pay this and whatnot. And then he'll turn around and tell me, I don't have shoes, I don't have jeans, I don't have any clothes, and I'm going, what is your mom spending this on? $480 a month is going where? It's going to her, her rent. But I know with my own kids, I'm like, if I have another child, yes, there's going to be a minimal cost for food of, maybe $200 a year in clothes. And it's just crazy how much, the state considers that stuff. But I'll stop talking now. I feel like I'm taking up your whole show.
No, that's okay. I mean, you're the guest, so I want to get your input on things. But you touched on a lot of different topics. A couple things I'd like to kind of circle back to. And one thing that struck me is that you said that you felt that a lot of times married parents got this automatic presumption of 50-50, and I've found that not so much to be the case. I think that there's quite a few of us out there where, it's probably more likely that it's amicable when the 2 parents were married and are going through a divorce and are able to come to a 50-50 resolution. But it essentially only takes one parent, to not want to have 50-50 for the courts to, take the authority and say, okay, well, now we get to make the determination that's in the best interest of your child for
Yep.
you. If the two parents can't decide between themselves, then the court's going to do it. They're going to force it to go in front of a judge, and then the judge is going to make that decision. And that's one of those things where in our state, despite the fact that in our RCWs it says that we're supposed to have a right to 50-50, we don't. If one parent wants to deny the other parent that equal time, and that's been a big part of the work that we did with Family Court Reform USA, was to try to change some of these laws. The parental equality bill, is kind of our flagship bill, if you will. Everything starts with treating both parents equally. And I know that there's a couple different groups out there that are focusing just on unmarried parents, that, the court even views the situation a little bit differently. I think you have a better chance at getting your rights upheld if you're going through a divorce than if you weren't married and you have a child together and you've never lived together and things like that. I've heard of those struggles, that there's no presumption of equality at all, particularly for fathers. If the mom doesn't want the father in the child's life, they really are able to push him out of the kid's life, and it's not fair for the child. It's not fair for the father and that entire side of the family. So that's been a big part of our work, is to try to raise awareness about all of these different scenarios, to try to, just make people aware that, you're not alone going through this. In fact, there's a lot more people that have been silenced over the years, because they really had no way to communicate, or, if their friends weren't divorced, or if their friends weren't going through a child custody case, sometimes it was one of those things that was kind of, uncomfortable to talk about, or awkward to talk about, family holidays and all these different things. That's a topic that is going to automatically come up, and people didn't talk about it all that much before. And I think that now, you've got a lot more with social media, especially, you've got a lot more people who this is on the top of their mind every single day, and they're posting about it. They're going to different groups. They're looking for help. They're looking for resolutions. And something else that I wanted to talk a little bit about is, it sounds like we had some similar experiences when we were younger. My parents split up when I was a little bit younger. I was about 12 years old when they split up. But I remember, being a young adult and seeing other families that stayed together just for the kids. They said, well, we can't get divorced. We've got to stay together for the kids. And I know that there's a lot of different thoughts on that. There are some people that just absolutely think that, marriage, marriage is it's a sacrament. It's forever. Getting divorced is a sin. Getting remarried is a sin. And there's a lot of different beliefs around that. But just the concept, just the basic concept of, that it's better for the kids to be in an intact family over, having two separate households. I think that there's a lot of kind of myths and different, just different beliefs and things that go into that, because I've seen some families that stayed together for the kids and they were absolutely miserable. They couldn't get their marriage problems resolved. They didn't want to be together. And to me, that's putting some guilt on the kids to say, hey, my parents are staying in this miserable situation for us, when the kids don't even want. I would have never wished that upon my parents. I never once felt like, oh my God, I wish my parents had stayed together for me and my brother. I never thought that. If the marriage wasn't working, it's like, I want them both to be happy, to have the life that they want. And if it means being separate, then that's what it means.
Yeah, and it comes down to an issue of violence too. My parents, there was quite a bit of violence, and us children watching that in itself is abuse. And that's something that even as a kid, I recognized that I never wanted to have that in my relationships. And so when I was dating my son's mom, like the third time we got back together again, trying to make things work, she had just moved back from, we had both moved back from Alaska. She was still up there, and I was taking care of my son full time. And by the way, if you ever leave the state and get back together and child support goes on hold for 8 months or a year or two, apparently child support keeps running the tally, even though they put it on hold, which they got me for later. They basically billed me for 2 years of child support. And I said, I did have my son most of the time, but all she had to do is make a call saying, oh, we're not together anymore, and rebill that. And they actually nicked me for $8,000 all of a sudden, and started threatening my driver's license and everything else right off the bat. So I wanted to warn folks about that. But anyway,
and you guys were actually back together at the time, and they were still. So you guys were living together, or no?
Yes, up in Alaska, we were actually staying together, and then I moved back, and she gave me a letter of permission to move back with him, and then she would stay there for 3 more months to finish her job out. But when she came back and then we broke it off, they actually restarted up the child support, and then said for that amount of time that we were together, because I didn't have receipts or payments to her showing that I was paying him, even that time that we were together, they were like, you owe that money for the child support, that monthly dividend for that whole time. And I could not believe it. I was absolutely shocked. But they nicked me there, and it might have been something I could have hired an attorney and argued, but you're talking to a guy that, had an injury, was just had a struggling business, and, spending even $200 on a lawyer was not something I could have done. So I nipped it in the bud and just kept going.
It's overwhelming too. A lot of times people don't realize how, they say, oh, well, you can just go back to court and you can ask for a modification, or you can do this, that, or the other thing. I mean, we go through, number one, we lose faith in the ability of the court to actually act in our favor after a while. I mean, you have enough experiences in court where, they just don't, do the right thing, or what you think would be the right thing, to make adjustments or make decisions. So you lose faith to begin with. And then the other thing is it's not so easy to just go file a motion and show up for court. It can be extremely stressful. I mean, yeah. I am not an insomniac. I never have trouble sleeping, but every time I have to go to court, I cannot sleep the night before. My stomach is turning. I mean, it is such an anxiety producing situation for me. I don't want to ever see the inside of a courtroom if I don't have to. It is not a pleasant situation for me if I'm the one that's, involved with the case. I mean, as a CASA, I go to court and I don't have the same anxiety because it's not me. I'm representing, a child at that point, and my opinion is actually respected, which is funny because as a father in the courtroom, my opinion doesn't seem to, what I think is in the best interest of my child doesn't seem to matter whatsoever, but yet I can go through 40 hours worth of training, and I'm responsible for a child that's not even mine, and making recommendations to the court for what's in the best interest of this child. It's the bizarrest thing, but that's the way that our court system works.
And that's something we need to take advantage of and volunteer as much as possible. I volunteer with Pierce County's diversion program. I have a heart for troubled youth, being in law enforcement myself, and I worked over in Idaho in the youth criminal justice system, and became a juvenile corrections officer and then a probation officer. But most of these children are in horrible environments, and you can't save them from it, but hopefully you can speak a little bit of life into their lives and send them on their way with something that's going to give them a glimmer of hope. And but yeah, it brings me my thought. I've had conversations with a lot of my Democrat friends who are saying, well, people shouldn't have to get ID and to show when to vote because of their low income and all that. And then I bring up, well, what about, parental rights? And they seem to all agree that, something is wrong, something is messed up, but it just can't be fixed. And I disagree with that heavily. I think, people like us that are stepping up and getting involved in politics and hinting at it, we almost got to do it secretly. That is our intention down the road, because if you start talking about it that right up front when you're running a campaign or something like that, you tend to be ostracized, that you're feminist or anti-woman and all this stuff. And it's like, no, that just because I'm a guy talking about it, but women are also being affected by this.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah,
brings
for
me,
sure.
and that brings me back to, we were talking about violence, growing up, and then, with my ex, I just actually pulled over the side of the road in Fife one time, and I said, this isn't going to work. We're done. Like, when we're sitting here arguing so much in front of our child constantly, it's not good for his mental health. And so I just had a moment of strength, because I wasn't very bold in that period of my life. Very introverted, very much a male that, she was more of the rough, tumbly type girl. And, I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I said, no, we're done. I don't want to get into positions where we're being violent with each other and verbally abusive or anything. And so I stepped away from that relationship, and it was one of the best days of my life. And it ended up taking it into texting form now, where I'm still in that relationship with her, and it is just nonstop over texting. And I'll keep pointing it out. The parenting plan says we have to keep open, positive communication open with each other, and speak respectfully of each other's discipline styles and everything else. And it's just not there. She'll constantly say stuff that, she basically calls me a liar all the time, because I'm telling her something that my son is doing and that he needs to, work on, and he can do no wrong in her eyes. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm the evil sperm donor, that is living life large and just, not being honest. And
Well, that's one of those things about toxic relationships, is that I think once they go toxic, this whole idea of co-parenting may just simply be impossible. I'm in a place where I basically parallel parent, because there's no, effective way to communicate between me and my ex-wife. And it's been 10 years. And it just, every once in a while we make it work, where we absolutely have to communicate about something. And it's usually a scheduling thing. And, really it's kind of gotten to the point where, she's remarried now. And
Yeah.
she started a relationship, almost immediately after she moved out. I don't know what the timing was exactly there, but, we were in the house together for about 14 months from the time that we split up, living in separate rooms and then filing for the divorce and everything like that. And that was a hellish 14 months. I mean, I would not wish that upon anybody, and that
Sorry.
was,
So
that's
sorry.
just part of our saga. But, it's just gotten to the point where, our communication it's only about exchanging the kids, holidays, vacations, and that's about it. There's no real possibility of co-parenting that I see in the future. And, that's what we ultimately had to do in order to get away from this toxic dynamic, because it didn't matter how, how I handled different things, how I addressed things. If I tried to be nice to her, if I tried to just be all business with her, nothing seemed to work. And it's because of this dynamic that developed and then never changed. And, without some sort of an external force, I just don't see it happening. I mean, I don't think that there's anything that I can do. And my kids, I mean, they're going to be 14 and 16 this year. I mean, they're almost aged out, of the system and of being children at this point. And so, we just kind of keep going forward. So, but one thing I did kind of want to go back to a little bit is you brought up politics a couple of times, and
Sorry.
no, it's all right. I'm going to bring it back up because we are, Parentalink and Family Court Reform USA are, bipartisan organizations. We've got people that are Democrats, people that are Republicans. It's no secret that I'm a Republican. I ran as a Republican, and that's how we met. I do tried my best to represent both sides, and we do work with Democrats. We had a bipartisan bill in the Senate in 2020. We're hoping to have another one in 2021. I've got some Democrats that say that they support this issue. They signed on to our bill. There's a couple that weren't sponsors of the bill, but they say that they get it, and that this is a very important issue. But I'm just curious about if you could just maybe talk a little bit more about how you feel the politics are impacting this, and what some of those dynamics are, because we've had some real challenges here in the state of Washington. This has been 6 years that we've been running bills, and we get some good support. I know that I get good support from the Republican side because I'm a Republican, but it seems that and that's only natural. But it seems that like you said earlier, these are the folks that say that they want to address this. These are the folks that are speaking out about parental rights issues and the issues with families and things, where it seems like, there are a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle that they say that they care about this. They acknowledge that there's a problem, but when it comes to doing something about the problem, it seems like, just the can keeps getting kicked on down the road further. So I'm wondering, some more of your thoughts on that, and how we can overcome some of that.
Yeah, honestly, it's if it's not affecting you, then it's kind of one of those scenarios where it out of sight, out of mind. We got the most people that either talk about or bring up family court reform, and the people that have probably said, the Democrats or the Republicans who said they support you, either know somebody or it's affected them somehow in real life. And that's what I've been finding out, is it's either about money or how that has affected that person personally who is in the political arena. When I ran my tiny house bills, I went to the Democrats first, because where affordable housing lies, and where when I would walk into a room full of Democrats and I'd say, I'm the tiny home guy, I build tiny homes and I want to do this for affordable housing and homeless people and everything else, I would practically, these people would be running up to me, giving me hugs and thanking me, and just I was a hero. And so I went to them first, and then just in action, oh yeah, I want to do that, I would love to help you out with that. And then it came down to nothing, sitting there 2 years later after hearing those kind of things. And even, local politicians that were in the conservative arena were doing that. But it wasn't until I met our senator in the 25th, Hans, that, he basically was just an amazing guy who just was like, I'm here to help. Here to listen to the issue, and I want to know more. Instead of brushing it off and saying, yeah, that's a great idea, well, I'll support you on it, I'll talk later. He actually picked up the phone and called me later. And then I had a couple 25th representatives at the time, Joyce and Melanie, who Joyce literally made a call that day and got me an appointment with our county exec, and said, we need to figure out how to help this guy. And instead of lip service, it became action. And then I found out the Democrats were actually passing what I had asked them on to different associations, trades groups, master builders, and groups like that, who all said, yeah, we want to support you in this. And I think it works I'm explaining it in what my experience is, because I think it relates a lot into other issues a lot. And mine was just affordable housing, tiny homes, but you could easily replace that and put a blank in there and just fill it with anything. And what I came to find out was, these groups, Democrats and Republicans, luckily enough, the Republicans I was working with were like, hey, we want to help, and we're going to try to figure out the issues as we go and start running a bill. The Democrats were more like hesitating and throwing it out there to all the trades groups and saying, how would it affect your business, and what do you guys think? And a lot of them, just to be honest, were saying, well, we don't want to do that because of how it's going to affect this and that. And or one of them, Mobile Home Association, came to me and said, oh, well, we were passed this by one of the Democrats in the housing committee, but we'll support yours if you support ours. But ours says only that these tiny homes can be placed in manufactured housing parks, when my bills were trying to get them, placed anywhere somebody wants an affordable house, whether it's in backyards and whatnot. So when it relates to parental rights and this is, I think we need to be leveraging the mental aspects of how it's affecting our children, the medical and the psychological stuff, that how it's affecting them, because it is, it is harshly, and it's going to, unfortunately, we've done that sin, whether it was a previous relationship or we got a divorce, and but sometimes that is needed. Like you said, it is so much needed when you have a toxic relationship, and those, it's just better to be in two households. My dad was in the prime example of the parents that stuck together and slept in different rooms and stayed together for the kids, and the kids knew it, and no big deal. My mom came from a childhood of, her dad remarried 3 different times in her lifetime, so she had that lifestyle, and so when I look back at how things can change in the political realm, it comes down to what the doctors are going to say, what when Democrats look at things that they really side on the side of women's rights, they side on the side of what is science, what is the whole aspect
Science.
science, and nothing in faith really, but they will Catholic Church and these churches, if they come down and really push towards something, they want to appease everybody, and the Republicans are more on the side of logic, and not the feeling stuff, and it makes sense to me as a conservative, like, why, and it makes sense to my Democrat friends too, who are like, yeah, this is affecting them, this is affecting people that they know and they love, and but when it comes down to the Senate floor, the House floor, and the topic and the hot topic issues, it's not one that they're getting calls on constantly. Like, I'm going through this issue and whatnot. People don't call their legislator when they're going through domestic. I know I didn't. I'm going through multiple situations where my child is from week to week being told, I'm using him as a pawn. You can't see him unless you do this. And, my first reaction isn't to call a legislator. I barely have enough money to call an attorney. And, I'm trying to work a day job and everything else. And then I'm this careless dad. But, it's frustrating. But, to get the legislator behind this is just, I guess, relationships is going to be key. And also kind of leaning on data. It's a common denominator, and Republicans point it out all the time that, criminals, most of them didn't have a dad around. Poverty is caused a lot of times by not having a dad around. And, if we lean on those things, it doesn't become a political of a Republican versus Democrat issue or anything like that. It just becomes an issue of, what's good for our kids, what's good for their mental health, what's fair and right, and lean on the emotion a little bit. I hope to answer your question with that.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of good insight, and I think you're absolutely right, about having to bring in more experts, more doctors, more child psychologists, more folks that are able to speak about this, from an educated standpoint, because I've been bringing this up for years. I've talked about the teen suicide rate and the teen pregnancy rate and the high school dropout rate, the incarceration rate, how all of these things, the drug use, the gang activity, the crime, all of these things correlate highly to kids that grew up, with poor environments in single parent homes quite often. I mean, you're looking at a very, very large percentage of it. The vast majority of men and women in prison grew up in single parent homes. And, unfortunately, there seems to be an intersection of different issues there. Like you brought up the women's rights issues and the domestic violence advocates. They often come into this conversation and they say, okay, well, if there's been any sort of accusation of domestic violence, then we have to put the kids with the mom and the dad can't see the kids, and
or vice versa.
that is,
yeah.
Or vice versa. But that's a whole nother area that really needs to be looked at, and seems to be very, very politically divisive. What's really interesting, and I'm not gonna call out any names, but there was a legislator that I met with, Democrat, and he had relayed a story to myself and another colleague, that came in with me to do some lobbying, and we were telling him our stories, and he kind of related back to us a situation that he had been through, and I could tell that he was very deeply moved by even having to talk about it. And he had been accused by his daughter of some sort of sexual abuse, and he didn't go into details of what it entailed. But not only was it the mom that had accused him, but it was the daughter also. And it turned out not to be true. And years later, he went through a real nasty divorce with his wife. He was completely alienated from his daughter for years. And then when she became an adult, she came back and, rebuilt her relationship with him, I guess apologized and said, hey, this was, it was basically her mom that had coached her and talked her into saying these things, or however it happened. And now she absolutely won't have anything to do with her mother, and she's close with her father now. And so, having been through that experience, you would think, well, this legislator should be a champion for the cause. This guy knows, because he's been through it. Mm-hmm. But yet, for some reason, I mean, when myself and my colleague were walking out the door, it was almost like he slammed the door behind us, and I looked at her and I was like, did you get the same feeling, like when he saw us to the door, that even though he said that he cared about this issue and wanted to help, that he really didn't, want to have anything to do with it. And I was never able to get a meeting with him after that. He was, he's never been willing to stand up for this particular issue. And I think it boils down to politics. And I don't think it's necessarily just that I was a Republican. I don't think the lady that went with me, I don't know if she had expressed any political leanings, but I mean, it's no secret, because after the election, when we had a I
don't know if it's your internet or mine, but I'm getting some choppy video, no audio. Oh, folks, if you're still watching and you're only watching me, I think we lost Kyle there for a moment. Sorry about that. And it shows me live still on Facebook, and I'm the only participant here. But just wanted to, if you can hear me, Kyle, hopefully you're still there. I'm going to message him here and see what's going on. This would be really weird if I am the only participant on this call now. I think he's messaging me. Am I still live? Yep. Okay. He's going to try to, there he is. He's coming back. Hi, Kyle. but yeah, I just want to take a moment and, just tell you, you're not alone out there, guys, if you're watching this, girls. But there he is. He's back.
Okay.
And
Did
that's
you
weird because
did
it
it keep
says,
you on live?
well, it shows me live on Facebook. So I'm like, this is really awkward if I'm sitting here alone.
You just got to take over the show. No, that's great. I thought we had lost the entire feed, but I guess it just booted me off for a few minutes.
That's yeah. You got really choppy. You went stagnant and then disappeared, and then it still says live on Facebook on mine. But I don't know
That's
how
what happens when we start talking politics, you know.
Yeah, apparently somebody's listening.
All of a sudden, the connection gets real bad, and we get cut off. It's such an odd coincidence.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of touch on, how scary it is doing all this and being a parent already, trying to be a good parent. I've realized in the past few months, especially with this whole I'm moving to Spokane issue, and I'm trying to raise a good child. Ultimately, it's going to be his decision on being a good person or not. But it's scary, just in every action that you do that someone else is involved, and going and asking him immediately what happened over there, and what was said. And I know what's going on because sometimes I've been on phone calls with him on his cell phone, and she's like literally saying that to him as he's getting in the car. And I told you, Kyle, a while back that I actually got a knock on my door by CPS, and they came visiting, and my son was seeing a counselor because of his mother left him in a situation that he was actually assaulted, and by a relative of her new husband, and things got really nice after she got involved, and then found got married, and things became really nice. Like, she was calling me all the time, can you take him every day? Of course child support doesn't go down, we can take him every day, but hey, I wanted more time with him, and great. But she had in my opinion, she has different sense of parenting, and she will let him just go anywhere and everywhere. And I'm more of a hands-on guy. I want to know where you're at, what time you're going to be back, and I vet everybody that he hangs out with. And she doesn't. And so, he actually got involved in a legal issue, and something that happened bad that happened to him, and it was tragic. But so he started seeing a counselor, and so she starts telling him to tell the counselor certain things that happen in my household, like I spank my children, the 3 and the 5-year-old. And one time my 5-year-old was, which was 4 at the time, was having a fit and flung himself on the floor. And my son said he felt like my wife was being too rough with him and all this. So he goes and tells the counselor, and the counselor's legally obligated to turn us in. And so they showed up and investigated us fully, and all case was dropped. They actually said, they were shocked just knowing everything that I'm doing for, and I actually counsel parents on how to be good parents. And so we're sitting there talking about, how dark and horrible this world is for our kids. And, they investigated us thoroughly. I mean, talking to my wife and one-on-one, they wouldn't let me in the room, wanted to talk to her and ask her questions like, who manages the finances? Do you have access to the checkbook? Does he beat you? Do you have any bruises? I want to see your arms. I want to see your legs. To my wife. And then they wanted, they made us strip down the kids, and, doing that kind of stuff. It was just a horrible experience. And the first thing I did was,
Wow.
the ladies at the front door is calling my attorney, and it was literally Thanksgiving weekend that this happened. So the attorney was out of the office, of course. And so I let her in, knowing that, she's trying to do her job, and she's looking out for the safety of kids everywhere. And if she finds me unsafe, then I am just the most unluckiest guy in the world. So, I took her in. They came back twice, doing the investigation, and let it go after that. But this situation where I spanked my 13-year-old in the butt because he's mouthing off to me, I'm worried it could bite me in the butt per se. But at the same time, like, I'm like trying to parent, I'm trying to raise good children that aren't disrespectful and that aren't screaming back, and that, hopefully listen and encouraged by that. But we live in a world, in a society now where, at a drop of a hat, I told my wife, my 3-year-old was sitting on top of a table and fell off of it, and he scratched his back, a day after I spanked my kid. And I'm just like, my first thought is, great, if CPS comes into the house, he's going to have a mark on him, and
Yeah.
and it's just scary, and I want
Yeah.
parents to know everywhere that don't be afraid, to parent but you gotta, in my opinion, you got to give it to God. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And we need, we have rights, and we need to be in community with each other to help protect ourselves and one another. But I've decided not to live a life of fear and to continue living life as normal. Even though it's an extreme dramatic normal that is constantly chaos and getting yelled at all day long. 2 days ago, literally my text messages was her just chewing me out nonstop. And I was just responding, you're almost in a, you're harassing me, please let it go. We're going to have to agree to disagree on some issues. I think what I did was right. And just, it's her baby. And, I try to empathize as much as possible in life. But when it comes down to this kind of stuff, it's just, I literally showed my wife the text when I got home, and I said, I'm ignoring it. It's just rolling off my back at this point.
Yeah. Well, I commend you for continuing to try to co-parent. I think that's a huge challenge. And what you just said is one of the most important takeaways from all this, is that we can't parent in fear. And that was something that I dealt with for quite a while. And I know a lot of other parents out there feel the same way. We are constantly in fear of what's going to be said about us in court, how some situation is going to be twisted, or, we're going to go into court and some lie is going to be told, or whatever it happens to be. And we're going to lose access to our children, or we're going to get, hit with some sort of a fine or some other punitive measure, or whatever it happens to be. There's all sorts of things that can happen. And when we're parenting in fear, then it's hard to have the respect of our children that we should have as parents. And that's, it's a huge issue, because kids need to be disciplined. We need to have the ability we need to be enabled to be parents. And especially with the fatherlessness issue in this country, I mean, it's really, really important that our children have that in their families. And when we're parenting out of fear, we're not being our most effective parents for our kids. And I struggled with that for a long, long time. I finally had to get past it. It got to a point where I have been able to not constantly worry about what the other household is going to do, what my ex-wife is going to do, what she's going to say, or what she's going to try to claim in court next time. And I mean, we didn't even go back and forth to court a whole lot. A lot of times it was really me documenting all the stuff that she was doing, but yet the court never, seemed to care, but when it was about me, then it always felt like there was a huge bias and a huge prejudice there. So, and one of the things that we're also trying to do with our organization, not just on the, not just Family Court Reform USA and changing the laws, but with Parentalink, is to provide this support network so that us as parents, we can talk about these things. We can share our experiences. We can have a support network to go to know that we're not alone, and know how to deal with some of these challenges. If we face something, we can share it with other parents and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? And I think that helps a lot, because, I think that there's a lot of parents, just with the spanking issue, there's some parents that just think that is absolutely horrible. There's other parents that are like, whoop that butt if you need to whoop that butt, get that kid in line, and it's like, I'm a big fan of discipline. I mean, I think kids need to be disciplined. I know I needed to be disciplined as a child. If there aren't consequences for our actions, then, kids grow up to be undisciplined adults, and that can get them in a lot of trouble. And that's not what I want for my kids. And I know that's
No.
not what you want for your kids.
And my wife and I, we mutually agree on most part, but she's more of a softie, and she doesn't want to spank the kids right away if they're being disciplined. And I was reading something, actually I read it to my son, who was the one mouthing off that day, right here as he was pouting. I was telling him, there's consequences to your actions, and a parent is supposed to teach you that. If I don't teach you that, no one will. You'll end up becoming, going into society thinking there's no repercussions for your actions, and you're going to be a bad person. And I'm trying to help encourage you not to be. And I said, and the only way I can do that is to be consistent. And, instead of yelling, which I grew up in a household where my parents were, constantly yelling at me, and I'm trying to prevent my kids growing up in an environment as that as well. It's easy to do. You just start yelling at them, but the consistency of going over and saying, no, you did something wrong. Here's a little paddle on the butt that, it's not going to leave a mark, but you're going to give them a hug immediately afterwards and try to explain to them, there's consequences for that reaction. And instead of yelling at them and causing damage by being verbally abusive, you're creating a loving relationship of discipline and follow through. And I think that's critical. And I cried to my son. I told him, we're having a bad day. We're going to get through this. I still love you. I want you to know that. And he left hugging and gave me a hug before he left and everything. But then the next thing I know, you're getting the text message, you hit my child, really? You got to see a counselor. You have anger issues and blah blah blah. And it's a sad world, but I want to go and just be vulnerable and tell people, within a year or two of him being born, with the family dynamic of constantly being harassed, it led to massive depression. Going into that world of, and I've realized now that, I'm not in control. Like, trying, when you're in the situation and you're going through the verbal abuse from another party constantly, it puts you in a dark place. And I was very suicidal there for a while, and just the thought of my son growing up without a dad actually kept me alive. I wanted him to know I cared, and I didn't pick the easy way out. And not to make it a he or she win scenario, but you are going to be the winning party if you stick through this, and love on your child the best you can. And you're taking the abuse, you're taking the hits, and just try to help other people out, and that will actually get you through this. I mean, you actually contacted me, Kyle, at a really weird time. I got this message, would you be willing to be interviewed? And then I'm just sitting there going, yeah, this is what needs to happen. We need to be out there helping each other, because no one's going to do it. And if you're alone going through this scenario, you think you're alone. You don't realize there's power in what's going on to you right now, what's happening to you. And I'm not necessarily a victim. I bad stuff has happened, but I put myself in a bad position, and I knew what some of the things I was doing. Like, I was dating somebody that had a complete personality that wasn't going to work with me. But I think people need to work together and just be kind and empathetic. She talked about moving to Spokane. I understand that immensely. She says it's because she wants to be closer to family, and she wants to find an affordable place to live, and she can't do it locally. And I get that. I work in affordable housing, and I'm like, yes, yeah, completely. And she goes, what do you think is right? I'm like, 50-50 scenario. How can we do this 50-50? I'd be willing to homeschool him when he's with me, and that way he can stay in his school district, and trying to figure it out. But she's adamantly, no, that's not going to happen. And then I'm like, okay, so you expect me to pay the $480 in child support, and then also pay for plane tickets to get him over to me and all that? I'm like, I can't do that. And she goes, no, she'll pay the most of the plane tickets, kind of thing. And it's just it got to the point where she's like, no, well, you should just move your whole wife's family and your family over to Spokane. And I'm like, you really think that's logical? And she goes, no, you're right. But there are times where we talk, it's whenever she's trying to get something, she'll be very, respectful and trying to figure things out. But for the most part, it ends in, okay, get ready for a battle. It's going to cost you a lot of money and I'm going to win. And that's how most people on the other side are, that they're thinking that because they know that's the truth, the reality of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on our hour here. I really, really enjoyed the conversation with you, Todd. I can relate to a lot of the stuff that you've been through with the, with the depression and with the abuse, the legal abuse, the emotional abuse, we didn't get into the domestic violence and things, but there was some of that going on in my situation as well. And it really leaves you feeling alone. It leaves you feeling depressed. And one of the things that always kept me going was just knowing how much my sons needed me, and that there was absolutely no way that I was going to abandon them or leave them without a father that continues to fight to be in their lives. And I think that makes a huge difference. But we're here for you. I know that you're there for other parents as well. I appreciate all the work that you do. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story tonight. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just that if, feel free to share my email and whatnot, with anybody that needs some prayer, some guidance. The YMCA is actually a really good resource. I'm wearing the shirt tonight just to promote that. There's actually a virtual Y for the Pierce and King counties right now online, that you can actually contact a chaplain that, that if you're going through that dark place, and, most of us are, depending on, that are going through this situation. And so, reach out to a chaplain and just, it's a good opportunity to vent, and you might find some resources of some people that can come alongside of you and help. I don't want to get too preachy, but, God's in charge. We'll get through this. And, looking back, it's all about that relationship with your child when they become an adult. That's what I'm, looking forward to is, when he decides on his own where he wants to live and who he's going to live with, that's fine and dandy. But when he's 18 and going to college and has a kid, how are things going to affect him then and with his future mate and I want the best for him. And ultimately it's going to be up to him. But I'm just going to be a good dad. And I think you're a great dad, Kyle, and I appreciate you doing this.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well. I appreciate your time and your prayers and everything that you do for the community as well. If you want to add like a link at the bottom underneath our video for people that want to reach out to the Y to get any sort of service or anything like that, I think that would be great as well. So thanks once again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you, brother. God bless.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a good night. You too.
Good night.